Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. Tanya, how's the weather in North Carolina?
It's actually a beautiful day today. I think it's like 83, not too hot, not too cold, sunny, and enjoyable. Now, humidity is a whole nother thing. And I'm just going to show you my coworker in case he wants to chime in today. This is Teddy. I think you've met him already, Bill.
I have.
He loves sex ed.
All right, and I see it's 4 o'clock Eastern. We'll give it maybe a minute for other folks to.
One more minute. One more minute.
And folks, we'll get started in a minute. Thank you for joining us. So nice to see some familiar names and some new names. Some people who have already registered, some people who were thinking about registering.
All right, Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon in New York, and that is where I'm meeting you from. My name is Brian Amkraut. I'm the Vice President for Workforce Credentialing and Community Impact here at Mercy University. And we thank you all for joining us for this Certifi Spotlight to learn more about the certificate program in social justice and sexuality education, which we are thrilled to offer in conjunction with our partners at SexEd. To tell you a little bit about our division, we've been around at Mercy for a little over 2 years, and our goal in our division of workforce credentialing and community impact is really to extend the mission of Mercy University to provide educational opportunities that can really be transformative in people's lives, whether it's to get professional advancement, to learn more about the field which you're currently active in, or just for personal enrichment. We've got something for you. Go to the next slide, please. And if you've got any questions about programs that we offer through Certifi, or if you're just interested in learning a little bit more, please go to our website at Certifi, that's Certifi with an I.mercy.edu, and you'll see a whole range of opportunities there. We believe when we truly do that learning is a lifelong endeavor, and that you're never too old to get an additional skill. And our goal is to make that accessible, affordable, and easy to navigate. So please, if you see something you like, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you're interested in learning more about this program, you'll find that information there as well, particularly with respect to registration. But I know that you guys did not come on the webinar today to hear from me, and I'm going to turn the program over to our partners. Just here's the run of the show for the day. You're going to get a chance to hear about the program from Bill Taverner and Dr. Tanya Bass. And then we encourage you throughout the program, any questions you may have, put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom interface. And then we'll, pick your questions up either on the fly or we'll deal with them after the presentation, and then wrap it up and send everyone on their way. So we're really pleased to have as our partner Bill Taverner, who is the president of the Sex Ed Lecture Series and also the chief editor of the American Journal of Sexuality Education. And this is our second offering in conjunction with Sex Ed. We were really pleased with the program we offered last year. And so this is the first of two that we've got up on deck for you this year. So I'm happy to turn the virtual podium over to Bill, and he tell you a little bit more about Sex Ed and introduce our guest speaker for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Taverner, and as Brian mentioned, I'm with the Sex Ed Lecture Series. And those of you who have been participants in the Sex Ed Lecture Series, you know that we run webinars once a week, every Wednesday, and we also have a collection of hundreds of recorded webinars that have taken place every week since the pandemic started. And so I couldn't be happier than to have our collaboration with Mercy University and their certified program, and to offer this certificate program on social justice and sexuality education, and to work very closely with one of my closest friends, Dr. Tanya Bass, who I'm now pleased to introduce. Dr. Bass is a national award-winning sexuality educator and a subject matter expert in the areas of health equity and sexual health. She's an alumna of North Carolina Central University's Department of Public Health Education and the Center for Human Sexuality Studies at Widener University. Dr. Bass is the founder of the North Carolina Sexual Health Conference and the lead instructor for human sexuality at North Carolina Central University. Dr. Bass is also the author of the brand new guidebook, Representation in Sex Education, Cultivating Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, which comes out later this month. She is a highly requested trainer, facilitator, and keynote speaker. Audience members and training participants describe Dr. Bass as dynamic, energetic, and captivating, which I would say also describes our conversations, Tanya. She is praised for her ability to connect with a multitude of audiences. As a member of the North Carolina Society for Public Health Education, the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians, and ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, she remains engaged in professional growth and development. She's an ASECT certified sexuality educator and a certified health education specialist. And I can't think of anyone that I would want to work more closely with on social justice and sexuality education than Dr. Bass. So let me turn it over to you, Tanya. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I appreciate it. I am very excited as well to collaborate with you, to collaborate with Mercy, and to have a conversation and create this certificate program that is something that is near and dear to me through both professional and personal life experiences and work experiences. I think the time is more relevant now to have such a certificate program on social justice and sex ed. And what better place to talk about social justice than sexuality education? For our profession, it is something that many times we assume is something that is rooted in grounding our work. But moreover, there are things that we kind of glean over or skip over, or even our educators aren't, or professions, not just educators, but counselors, therapists, et cetera, anyone in the profession, oftentimes we aren't given the opportunity to be trained and educated on specific social justice issues and amplifying identities, and even learning about historical perspectives that are very important to our work, that kind of inform our work and impact our work. Honestly, the creation of the Sex Ed lecture series and its creation during the pandemic and dealing with COVID, but also COVID itself highlighting issues around social justice, racial justice, equity, and inclusion. I think it's super important that with the creation of the series, that we were able to have conversations about how this informs our work as sexuality professionals. So when we look at the certificate program, it's really an opportunity for professionals to really look at the intersection and the I guess the Venn diagram, so to speak, of how they blend into one another, social justice as well as human sexuality, thinking about different perspectives, how theories play a role, and diverse perspectives overall in human sexuality. And so that's what we hope to do. You can go to the next slide. And so with that, we have goals and objectives, or really learning objectives, that we hope to achieve. And I know in thinking about this program, and again, other opportunities I've had to either teach or present, or those conversations that Bill was alluding to, like what is important for our profession. And as a side note, just completing my dissertation during the pandemic, and the topic itself, I was researching and looking at health professionals, specifically sexuality educators, that were trying to rate themselves around capability and comfort in teaching sexuality education in specific areas, specifically looking at social justice, racial justice, and the historical perspectives, looking at their professional disposition, professional humility, similar to cultural humility, and also looking at ways that they can assess themselves and build and cultivate a professional disposition and dispositional humility. Things that kept coming up were related to social justice, areas in which professionals wanted to build their comfort, build their capability, and improve their practice in human sexuality. So with that, when we look at the objectives of the program, we really want to look at how sexuality, again, intersects and overlaps with aspects of our identity, thinking about our social identities of race, gender, class, etc., and understand how these identities impact how we teach and what we teach, and how we can affirm identities, how representation matters, and even the historical perspective. So the second objective is looking at history. One of the greatest tasks that I've had working as a public health and sexual health professional is really examining past experiences and how it informs my work. And even if people that we teach and ourselves, when we don't know these historical things that have happened, we still are impacted by their ramifications. And we don't want to repeat some of the mistakes and missteps, but learn the lessons from history. But if you don't know them, you can't really learn from them. So thinking about how history and culture influences the perceptions around our sexual beingness, our sexual selves, and the acceptance and discussion around sexuality. Also challenging narratives. So all of us have been socialized in one way or another. And sometimes as we're growing and developing, we kind of see ourselves bumping up against the way we were socialized. And so the same thing would hold true for the individuals that we're teaching or providing therapy for. So it's important to look at it through the lens of history and understand what sexual norms and societal norms exist across different societies and how that shows up in our work. And then finally, really examining and understanding human rights, sexual freedom and liberation, reproductive justice, understanding consent, and how that shows up. So many of you may actually use curricula to teach and inform, and you might be required to, but most of that curricula probably doesn't really have a focus or center the voices of the marginalized. And so we're hoping, and I'm hoping, that the content will help build that up more for you in a personal way, but also how that shows up in your teaching methodologies. We'll go to the next slide. Overall, when we think about putting this together and thinking about what is it going to look at, we're hoping that all the learners will have an opportunity to build on their understanding, to look at culture, look at history, using both the readings that will be available, but also course discussions and bringing your full selves to the course and the certificate program. Again, looking at sexuality through the lens of social identity, as well as the way we've been socialized, and thinking about systems of power and raising the voice of the marginalized. And then using sexuality education as a tool for social justice, but understanding it itself as being social justice. And when we think about that, maybe, we're going to talk about this in the course, but as I keep saying social justice, my assumption is that most of you, if you're interested in the program, if you've already enrolled in the program, you understand what social justice is. But just as a note, to really think about how things are fair and equal and just across the board, whether it's public health, sex ed, life in general, that's that social justice aspect that we want to uplift as we're discussing topics within the certificate program. Next slide. And so when we're looking at the course structure, we know that it will be some asynchronous learning, some synchronous learning. The asynchronous aspect, I'll show you a little bit more as we're going on, some examples, but we have 12 or so pre-recorded lectures All of the lectures did come through the Sex Ed lecture series. So if you've attended some of them might be familiar to you, but we'll also be, revisiting them and taking pieces of those lectures that really uplift a specific topic in sexuality education, maybe intersecting with a specific identity or population specific to individuals, and how that shows up and how we can look at sexuality through inclusion, equity, as well as social justice. The live sessions that we will have, we'll meet 2 times a week, and we'll spend about an hour and a half of time discussing different topics, highlighting and going back, maybe weaving in aspects of the particular lectures that were assigned for that week, and really having a discussion that will help build our toolkit for working in this profession. So if you are someone who has that evidence-based curricula that you have to work from, what are some aspects, some nuances related to the world and social justice that aren't going to be in your EBI or your evidence-based intervention or your curriculum, but will be something that you can bring to your teaching and to your facilitation to ensure that you are centering social justice and the voices of the marginalized. Next slide. And so here we have a snapshot. So again, there will be several, up to 12, I believe, pre-recorded webinars from the Sex Ed lecture series. But here are a few that we're going to be looking at. And so we're going to be looking at an ageless conversation and really we talk about sexuality education as lifespan and lifespanning learning. So we're going to really look at this with this particular webinar by Raven Weaver and looking at sexuality across the lifespan, but specifically looking at late life, hoping that many of you, even if you are someone who primarily works with adolescents, or maybe you work with adults, but again, looking at the range of identities that we hold and how sexuality and social justice shows up. We'll also be looking at the intersection of reproductive justice and sex ed. Oftentimes, again, and at least in my experience, and maybe it's yours, and if not, we'd love to see how you bring that to the certificate program. But when we're talking about either reproductive justice or sexuality education, there are few times that we get to talk about sexuality education and reproductive justice, or with reproductive justice, or through a reproductive lens, and vice versa. Many of you might be familiar even with the reproductive justice framework and how that's very important to our work and social justice. So this is an opportunity with Fatima Hayward to really talk about what that might look like, and how to center, again, social and reproductive justice in our work. Another example is implementing anti-racist strategies, utilizing some of those curricula that I was just mentioning, if you're required to use them. And my colleague, actually, Leslie Massacott, recorded this webinar and looking at sexuality education through this way in a classroom setting. So again, building on the skills that we need, or that have been identified as something that we need in our profession, to ensure that we're doing our due diligence in even the implementation of an evidence-based intervention or facilitation of that curriculum. I'm going to go to the next slide and look at a few more examples. So other examples, again, we already know that this is lifespan learning, but a lot of us have had experience, and a lot of our work centers around youth and adolescents. So this particular webinar with Mary Capello and Jessica Dennison is looking at puberty conversations, but specifically looking at it from a transgender and gender diverse youth. Again, if you've been in this work for a while, you know that most of our work is very binary centered. And so this is an opportunity to look at gender diverse youth, transgender individuals, and identifying youth, and bringing that, even if you don't work with young people, I'm pretty sure and confident that there are things that you will learn that will help you if you work with a older adult or young adult population and not just youth. So there are many things that you can learn through these webinars and through our discussions in the classroom, as well as the readings that we'll have. The next one is ableism and intimate relationships. And so I really appreciate this webinar because we think about the ways in which we don't talk about disability justice in our work. So again, when we say social justice, it's kind of like all those other things are aligned, like in environmental justice, racial justice, reproductive justice are kind of aligned and embedded in social justice, but really looking at ableism and disability justice through intimate relationships with Alexa Strickland and Kathy O'Connell, who led this webinar, and highlighting the importance. We can even see ableism in our lessons, ableism in navigating the work that we do and facilitation, but also uplifting ableism or teaching specific components around ableism, and actually more so disability justice in the work that we do, uplifting disability justice in our work. And then finally, another example is multicultural perspectives on sex education. One of the things that in my work and even building the work around the one of the texts that we're going to use that Bill mentioned is realizing that most of what we teach has been created in a monocultural way. And so when you have that, you limit the ways of diversity and uplifting diversity. So the hope is that as we're having discussions, we can talk about some of the challenges and barriers in our work by using a monocultural lens, and then think about the opportunities that we have when we bring in a range of diverse perspectives and multicultural perspectives in sex ed. So that's with Helena Salgado as well. So these are just examples of the 12 webinars that we'll be using in the teaching in the certificate program, and you'll get to view them and answer some questions related to them. And then as we have our synchronous learning opportunity, we get to discuss them and dive deeper into some of these topics. And of course, if you have any questions, please make sure you get those ready for the chat. We'd love to answer some of those for you. And we'll go to the next slide, which allows us to talk about the certificate program. That the course actually starts on July 9th, that we'll be meeting twice a week for about 1.5 hours, and really carving out time for you to review the webinars, which are about an hour in length, to also carve out time to attend the actual live sessions, and also carving out time in your schedule to actually do some of the reading that might accompany this. And I know it feels like school, and maybe, you know, being here at the end of the school year and folks graduating, I would like to think that this is fun learning. I would like to think of this as our professional development, which is oftentimes fairly limited in what we can obtain as sexuality professionals. So I think it's a great opportunity to build not only our professional portfolio, but expand our personal worldview as you go through the process. I'm thinking, I don't know if the slides are there with the course or the textbook, but otherwise we will spend some time answering some questions.
So Tanya, you got one question that just showed up, asking if there are male teachers within any of the videos, webinars, or materials that you'll be using.
Yes, I believe so. Yes. I think it's fairly gender diverse, but we also had to be careful, and I'm saying we, but also me and Bill, we were looking for opportunities to uplift topics that were relevant to the certificate program, but also trying our best to ensure that the identities of those folks presenting were representative as well.
Tanya, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm remembering one of the webinars is by Wayne Pulowski, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah,
I
you're
have
not the
all
whole-
the titles and not the names of the individuals who are teaching it.
Okay, gotcha. There's one on BDSM, correct?
Yes,
Okay, I think that's Wayne's.
that might be Wayne. Okay. Yeah, and Bill, you bring up, I know we have some more questions, but I'll just jump in to say I was trying to scroll through to my notes that we do have some topics related to beyond, beyond the binary, ableism I already talked about, BDSM, taboo, things that are taboo, looking at multicultural, sorry y'all, why my phone just rang. Multicultural perspectives, but also taboo around multicultural perspectives and digital storytelling. So BDS 101, I think that maybe Wayne, what sexuality educators should know. Thinking about sexual rights and sexual pleasure. We have a few that are on pleasure, and looking at the historical perspective around the case for comprehensive sex ed, and looking at 3 decades of sexuality education research.
And the format, so you've talked quite a bit about the 12 webinars. The synchronous part is Tuesdays and Thursdays, evenings, Eastern time,
Yes.
for 90 minutes.
Yes.
I think you said that, but I just wanted to reinforce that. And so it'll be for all Tuesdays and Thursdays beginning July 9th through
August 4th.
August 4th. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And there's an additional question related to format regarding any additional readings, materials besides the webinars and the synchronous sessions. What do you expect in terms of additional work? And is there a final project for the program?
So there is no final project. Balloons, confetti, fireworks, right? But there are some additional readings, like, I'm structuring it in such a way that hopefully it'll be a light labor lift, but also a way to ensure that we're progressing along. Bill mentioned, so one of the course materials, or two that I can mention that I know we'll be using, I don't want to call it light reading, but the Representation in Sex Education, Cultivating Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging is a manual that's coming out and should be available at least online once the program actually starts. So there is no cost. The readings that we have will either be provided to you using the learning platform, or through a web link that will give you access to open materials. Another resource or text that I'm going to call it a text that we'll be using is Sexuality and Social Justice. It was actually just updated, and it's an open educational resource that is available, but some of the chapters are really specific to the topics that we're talking about. But the text in and of itself, just the title of the text, lets you know that we'll be talking about social justice, and the fact that the authors have made it open access is an act of social justice when we talk about accessibility. So we're really trying to model it all the way through.
Tanya,
You want to read the whole text.
Yeah, no, that's great. About the second text, do you recall who the authors are?
Yes, one of my colleagues, Jaylene Garlaza Patterson, was actually one of my instructors at Widener, but a colleague and friend and a member of ASECT, Becky Anthony and Alethea Zamaticus. They are the authors of this text, and reached out. I saw it when it was available, and then we reached out and have a conversation. And because it's open access and looking at some of the chapter content, I think it's going to be very cool, if nothing else, and insightful to have these conversations building on what we're using for the lectures as well. It's very complimentary.
That's fantastic. And the first title, Representation in Sex Education, you're the author, and it's published by the Center for Sex Education. And as you noted, the ebook will be available for free in the upcoming weeks. And if anybody wanted the print copy, it's there's a small cost for it. It's $29.
Yes. And each reading assignment will actually be listed, so that people can be aware if they want to read along. I mean, folks tend to grab things and go through it, and I really appreciate that type of learner, but also there'll be designated pages to say this is what we'll be talking about in the upcoming days or weeks or day.
Bill, there's been a previous question around scholarship opportunities. I know this is something we want to make available on a limited basis. We could just address that very quickly.
Yeah, I could speak to that. It's a great question. Let me drop a link into the chat. You know what? I don't know if I can send this to everybody, so I'll send it to you, Brian, and ask you to send it to everybody, or maybe send it to all the hosts and panelists. There we go. So if you could share this out to the audience, it's a link with general information about the program. And at the bottom of the page, there is a scholarship application form. We're giving out a limited number of scholarships for $500, so reducing the registration cost by $500. So there's an application process, and an internal review team will be reviewing those and sending out decisions.
Thank you. See if we can find a way to make that distributed to everyone. Next question, is there a community outreach component or an opportunity to discover more about access in one's own community?
There actually currently isn't, but there's kind of an assessment that goes along with this, and we'll talk about that probably during the first week and definitely the first day. And within that assessment, it's going to ask specifically for the participants if they know, or how knowledgeable they are about some of the rules and resources in their state or jurisdiction, depending on how they're situated. But there won't be an outreach component per se. But that's a good question, and I'm gonna write that down.
Right in the spirit of the program. Great question.
Right.
If we're having trouble with the link, I can also tell people, go to sexedlectures.org, click certificate program, and then just scroll to the bottom of the page. So that's
and we can send it by email to everyone who's signed up. We'll make sure everyone gets the link.
all right.
Yes, and I forgot, I was looking at my notes about like thinking about career and professional development. One of the things I wanted to say, well, it's amazing if, and no pressure as the vice president of ASIC, but also plug, but you do get ASIC credits, right? And so you have the opportunity, if you're someone, because I see someone who is attending that I know who this might be true for, that if you're pursuing ASIC certification, this is definitely a way to get some credits and document that. If that happens to be you, I would say save your certificate, save the syllabus once you get it. And I think that's great. Also, the assessment that I was mentioning, one other thing that's a great professional piece is the assessment is kind of aligned with if you work with young people in general, the first part of it. But once we get into the second part, it's asking about your comfort and capability around different topics. And honestly, that doesn't matter who your audience is. How comfortable are you talking about racial justice or LGBTQ topics? As we're looking at social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are important things to do a self-assessment on. And so however you answer these questions in the beginning, you might decide at the end, I won't say magically, but I hope that maybe your answers might change, or your rationale might change to the answers that you put at the beginning of the course than what you have at the end. But then you'll also seek additional things that might be beneficial to you or support in our profession to help you gain a little more comfort and capability and understanding around these topics.
Let me throw a question to you, which I imagine the answer will be yes, but in the various topics that you're addressing over the many weeks of the program, are you going to get into specific work-based scenarios for our participants? Whether they're private practitioners or in formal education settings. Obviously, we believe there's a value add for folks in the careers that they're pursuing. Is that part of the curriculum?
Yes, it is. Specifically looking at, and I'm leaning towards this more as an example, but because it's one of more practical, but we also get to see who's actually in the learning space. But the example that I use around folks who are required to use an evidence-based curriculum, many of the challenges are like, how do you incorporate or go beyond a heteronormative perspective in teaching, or if questions come up, comfort and capability. So looking at some scenarios that participants bring, but also that I have available of how some of our colleagues have actually navigated and bringing social justice into the work on their own.
I do not see any additional questions in the Q&A box. Bill, any final points, thoughts to share?
I don't think so, except to say that I'm just so excited that you're offering this program, Tanya. I think you're the perfect instructor for this, and you know, hope this was informative. We can continue to be available to answer questions. My email address is bill@sexedlectures.org. So feel free to send me an email if you have questions. I'll turn it over to you, Brian, to go into wrap-up notes.
And just to remind everyone, the program starts July 9th. Price for the program is $14.95. As Tanya said, that will include materials. If you have questions, either related to the content or related to the structure, please follow up with us. We do have about half the class filled already. So we encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up quickly. And I do see there's one other another question about financing options. So that's something that please send us an inquiry directly if if you need to be on a payment plan or something of that nature. We can work with you. Thank you for your interest, and really want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank Bill and Tanya for sharing their expertise, not just here in the webinar, but in the program. And for the partnership, we're really thrilled to be working with you again.
Yeah,
Thank
likewise.
you. I hope to see you all in July.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good to see you all. Take care.